Hi there, folks. So I happened to spy this article wrote by Guy Verhofstadt for the Euronews entitled "The EU Must Address the Hungarian Crisis Before Lecturing Others." And once again, this article just demonstrates what an asshole this guy really is. And in it, he's basically whinging about the fact that Hungary doesn't want to take these migrant quotas, and that's basically undermining the EU authority. And why not? They should be sovereign. But of course, we all know this guy hates national sovereignty. So I thought I would just quickly go through this and point out some of the ridiculous things he says. So it starts off, European politicians have mastered the art of wagging their finger, most recently at Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and US President Donald Trump. Sadly, the same cannot be said for our ability to formulate political solutions and implement common policies. In other words, it's much easier to criticise others than it is to criticise yourself. The refugee crisis is shaking Europe to its core, because rather than taking collective responsibility for managing the flood of migrants and refugees into Europe, we've mostly shifted the burden to frontline countries. This has eroded European solidarity. No. What is causing the breakdown of European solidarity is the EU forcing policies on countries that don't want them. It is the continual breakdown of national sovereignty. How do you not see this by now? Do you not see the resistance that Hungary and Poland and Czech Republic are putting up? Do you not realise they don't want these policies? But it's this next line that says everything to me. Likewise, our inability to come together to stop Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's war crimes against his own people has left a void that Putin and Iran have filled. Now, what this says to me is that he's looking to get involved in Syria. One way or the other, he wants to deal with Bashar al-Assad. And in what form do you think that would take? Do you think you would have a friendly little chat with him over a cup of tea? No, I think that means invasion. Like all the other globalists, I think he wants to invade Syria. And it's not a surprise. The only thing holding him back would be an EU army, which he is vocally in support of.
A more effective union, a more democratic union, with a real European government, with a real European defense capacity.
European army?
A European army, yeah. What's wrong on this?
Everyone likes to believe that the EU is too virtuous to go to war, and this is just complete and utter nonsense. The reason internally why countries haven't gone to war is because really there's no reason. What would you benefit from invading another country within the European Union? But even other than that, the cost of fighting another developed country is insane. If you think the Afghan and Iraq war cost the UK about £29 billion, and those aren't overly developed countries, you imagine the cost of going to war with another developed nation. I mean, it would be insane. You would have to demolish their economy in order to defeat them. And the cost of rebuilding that country again, you would gain nothing from it. We barely gained anything from the Iraq war other than oil. And the reason why most countries within the European Union haven't went to war externally is because of NATO. NATO really takes all the military action for countries within the European Union so that they don't have to do anything themselves, really. And relatively speaking, they've actually done somewhat of a good job of that. But you'll notice that European leaders now seem to be, it's almost as if they're trying to provoke Trump to withdraw funding, because if NATO is no longer funded, that will be the perfect excuse for the European Union to form its army. And you would notice that the UK and France were the most vocal opponents against the idea of a European Union army. Now with Britain having left the European Union, and Macron, he never mentioned the European Union army. I suspect he's in favour, actually. I mean, we know he's a Europhile. He's been kissing up to Merkel a lot recently. So I would imagine he wants what the European Union wants. And if they want an army, he probably wants an army too. And of course, like I say, you seem to see these European Union leaders trying to provoke Trump into withdrawing funding for NATO. And that would obviously give them the exact excuse they want for an EU army. And once they get it, I believe they're going to start invading the Middle East. So in my opinion, what's prevented the European Union from going to war is lack of means as opposed to lack of will. He carries on to say, European leaders too often shout from the sidelines when they should be on the field acting to defend common European interests. Well, doesn't that tell you everything? They lack enthusiasm. They don't want to protect your ideology. The man can't see what's right in front of him. It's those beady little eyes. He's blind. And as if our failure to ensure stability in our own neighbourhood wasn't enough, we've also allowed right-wing populist nationalist movements to take off within the European Union itself. Listen to the language that guy uses. We have allowed, or we shouldn't have allowed anyone to speak against the European Union. Off to the gulags with you. I mean, the guy speaks like a dictator. Does he even listen to what he says? I mean, how dare we have someone challenge our views? The guy's completely off his rocker. Oh, but this next one's even better. These movements, actively fomented by Russia, have produced homegrown political leaders who frighteningly, but not surprisingly, resemble Putin and Erdogan. But more Russia conspiracy theories. Oh my god. Putin is some sort of omnipotent, omniscient being. He's everywhere doing everything all the time. Just shut up, mate. Poland's de facto leader, Jarosław Kaczynski, and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban in particular have been busily constructing illiberal states within the EU. Since coming to power in 2010, Orban has been using his large parliamentary majority to rewrite Hungary's constitution for his own ends. He probably got the idea from the European Union. Apparently winning elections is not enough. Oh yeah, how dare he win democratic elections? If I didn't know that Guy Verhofstadt was a politician, I'd be inclined to say he's a comedian. He now wants to shred the liberal values that he once championed as a young centrist politician and cement his control over Hungary's political process. Pot, kettle, black. In recent years, he has pursued this project through varied and ruthless means. The government regularly harasses or raids civil society and non-governmental organisations. Yes, because it's not like one of the more virtuous European Union countries, let's say Germany for example, has ever raided the homes of people for disagreeing with government policy. Media outlets that disseminate Orban's propaganda receive tax breaks, while those that criticise him are taxed so heavily that they eventually have to give up. This means the EU money is effectively being used to stoke Euroscepticism. Again, how dare we have differing opinions? But the European Union might want to think twice before throwing stones in a house of glass, especially when it comes to the idea of propaganda manipulation and what does and doesn't get put out on the media. For instance, I didn't hear any of the pro-European sources talk about the 8 more areas in Sweden that have been added to the list of no-go zones. In what is only the latest outrage, Orban's government is attempting to shut down the Central European University in Budapest. Although the CEU, founded by the Hungarian-American investor and philanthropist George Soros, the philanthropist George Soros, and led by the human rights scholar and former Canadian opposition leader Mikhail Ignatieff, is just 26 years old. Many of its departments already rank among the top 50 in the world. Nonetheless, Orban has refused to talk with Ignatieff. Consequently, the university could be forced to close by the end of the year. And I am just sure that university would not be a liberal cult of diversity. I'm sure it wouldn't be used as some sort of factory for social justice warriors, churning them out at unbelievably alarming rates. Despots throughout history have used the same tactics, but Orban is doing so in the EU of 2017. It's worth remembering that in order to join the European Union, Hungary had to meet stringent accession criteria, including credible democratic institutions and adherence to the rule of law. The fact that those high standards are now being systematically eroded has introduced a paradox for the European Union. Once a country has gained entry into the bloc, there is little that can be done to ensure that it maintains the democratic standards and upholds European values. It's almost as if you didn't think it through very well. The European Commission can launch as many infringement procedures against Hungary as it wishes. Orban will simply ignore them with smirking pleasure. Right on him. After months of discourse with Hungarian government officials, the EU's only option now is to invoke Article 7 of the Treaty of Lisbon, which could ultimately remove Hungary's voting rights within the European Union. Surprise, surprise, silence the dissenters. Europe's credibility already suffers because some of its leaders hold ambiguous attitudes towards Erdogan, Trump and Putin, but continuing to waver over Orban's transgressions will have even more serious long-term costs. We Europeans must aspire to be more than just participants in an internal market. Listen to the demanding tone of this guy. We must aspire. Where do you get off, mate? He finishes off, a values-based community has no place for governments such as those that now rule Hungary and Poland. The EU should invoke Article 7 as soon as possible and with the broadest possible majority among member states. And after Orban, we must turn our attention to Kaczynski. I mean, this whole article just demonstrates that this guy is completely nuts. He gives himself authority, he gives the European Union undue authority. It's insane. Do you not realise that the citizens and politicians of these countries don't want you forcing your ideology down their throat? You're supposed to be there to help them, not to be their moral authority. You're supposed to listen, not to silence. That's something that a sane person would understand. But of course, Guy Verhofstadt is insane. Thanks for watching.